We're going to be forward to our Respondents Panel here, where we're going to have Crissy and Ladlee, Velázquez, and Bud, and our great moderator, Ladlee. Essentially, we want to complement some of the work that Teresa and Sasha have done with the analysis, visual analysis tools that Jim and Harry are going to present. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton here to Chris, who will introduce our panelists. Just for timekeeping here, want to see if we can kind of hit our mark. Right now, we are scheduled to have our networking lunch at 11:30. I'm going to push that back to, we're going to look at like 12:40. I mean 11:40. Sorry. That would be crazy, right? But you guys are listening, so that. So yeah, we're going to push that to 11:40 to afford ourselves some time for some. I would pretty sure we'll have some questions after this. All right.
Well, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Philip. My name is Dr. Christopher Alley. I am the Pioneers Chair in Telecommunications at Penn State University, also Professor of Telecommunications. It's my great pleasure to be moderating this panel, this respondent panel, where we're going to be continuing our conversation about all things data. And before I introduce our panel, just a couple of thoughts about this, which is how crucial data is to everything that we're all doing in this room, but also a reminder that data comes in shapes of science. We're going to hear a lot about maps, certainly, but we're also going to hear about experiences and stories and best practices. This kind of qualitative side of data gathering is absolutely essential. Broadband stories to drive the meaningful, equitable policy making so many of us are invested in. So this is why I'm just really pleased as punch to be moderating this panel here. So let me introduce our fabulous panelists. Starting with the gentleman on my left, this is Crissy, Regional Economic Resource Development Extension Agent for Penn State Extension in North Central Pennsylvania. Then we've got Jerry Velázquez, President and CEO of Cumberland, New Jersey Improvement Authority. Jim Ladlee, State Program Leader, Emerging Advanced Technologies at Penn State Extension. And last but not least, Nathan Flood, President and CEO of KINBER. Each are going to give some fabulous presentations, and then we will take question and answers from the audience, from the virtual audience, and then I've got some gems to be asking as well. So I will start off by inviting Harry and Jim to give us their presentation.
Thanks, Chris. I think my job here today is to give a little context on the tools that we've developed. So before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you to Philip and the Philadelphia Federal Reserve for pulling such a great program together and an event that's so important to the future of communities everywhere. And I also wanted to say thank you and express our gratitude to Dr. Kopko and the Center for Rural PA for their consistent encouragement, support, and passion to make a positive difference. If you follow them, you'll see that as well. Jumping to our geospatial intelligence tools, we believe the National Broadband Navigator is a tremendous resource for local elected officials, nonprofits, agencies, ISPs, and businesses to quickly and easily use massive amounts of data to advance local broadband conversations for local project development. The tools you will see were funded through the generous support of the Rockefeller Foundation. We couldn't have done it without them. The tools are designed to harness publicly available data to expedite broadband deployment, equity, and utilization conversations. But the real aim is to maximize local impact of the funding that's currently being. From a Penn State Extension perspective, our goal has been to leverage the applied research and education as part of the land grant network to drive real upstream solutions and positively impact broadband deployment for those most in need. Extension has been involved in rural broadband for decades. However, the conversation has obviously changed and ramped up in substantive ways over the last few years. Just jumping back a little bit to 2017, Tom Bresniak, who is also with Penn State Extension, and Joe Whitmer with the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission worked to bring together a small meeting, primarily of rural electric cooperatives, so it's ironic we're here today, around the bidding process for the Connect America Fund 2 auction. And CAF 2, I think most people realize, resulted in more than $50 million in broadband deployment for the state of Pennsylvania. In 2019, 2020, Joe Whitmer, acting on behalf of Chairman Brown Dutrell at the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, requested a map for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction to help facilitate the bidding process, but most importantly, to also help local elected officials identify both funding that's available in their districts and the need within their districts. And that really was a home run in many, many ways. As I think Sasha said, we put that one together with Bubblegum and Tate just to make it happen, and I think it worked out pretty well. The RDOF auction awarded $368 million to ISPs, benefiting about 328,000 households in Pennsylvania. At the time, it was the seventh largest award in the country. So the bottom line was the geospatial intelligence tool started to make a difference. Fast forward to late 2022, in preparation for BEAD funding, Penn State Extension was awarded a contract to develop geospatial intelligence tools to pilot a utilization and equity program with the PA Broadband Development Authority. I'd like to say thank you to Brandon and the entire authority for the opportunity and a tremendous chance to make a positive difference on behalf of the Commonwealth. Also to Crissy Schmidt, who I believe is tuning in virtually, but she also headed up our utilization and equity pilot as part of that program. As we heard earlier, the PA Broadband Development Authority secured over $1.16 billion in BEAD funding for Pennsylvania, with over $117.6 million from successful service availability challenges supported by the geospatial intelligence tools in Penn State Extension. Building on the work of the Broadband Development Authority, Penn State was approached by the Rockefeller Foundation to expand the work for Pennsylvania to a national geospatial intelligence tool that became our national broadband navigator. The broadband navigator provides current broadband availability data, measurement tools to help estimate costs, and demographic variables related to poverty, youth, aging populations, health access, state elected official districts, and even more. It is designed to enable local elected officials to quickly facilitate data-driven conversations for local BEAD development projects, trying to eliminate some of the guessing that was going on previously and inform those conversations with real up-to-the-minute data. And again, it's to start the conversation, not to end the conversation. So with that, I'm going to move on to the demo because I think that's what everybody's waiting for. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the wizard behind the data and the geospatial intelligence tools, Harry Crissy. As you heard, Harry is a geospatial intelligence analyst for Penn State Extension, and he's going to run through a short demo of the current National Broadband Navigator and how quickly the tools can support your local broadband conversations in the development of local broadband projects. So, Harry?
Thank you, Jim. Again, Harry Crissy, Penn State Extension, Extension agent. I want to clarify that the data that's used on this instrument that you're looking at is all going to be public data or derived from the fabric. If it's derived directly from the fabric, you cannot download it. But other than that, everything on here you can download, and I'm going to show you how to do it. The idea is that your county commissioners with your GIS people can create their own maps, and we're going to do a demo map. Just to go over really quickly what the tools are here. If I wanted to see exactly if I wanted to zoom into where I'm located, this button will take me there. This will take me back to what I'm looking at now. This map is broken up, by the way, by our rural development centers. With Extension, we have 4 of them: the Northeast, the North Central, Western, and Southeast. And today we're going to look at the Northeast. You can bookmark your locations, your work. If you're not signed into Esri, just to let you know, and you refresh your screen, you will lose your bookmarks. So you get a free account with Esri. I kind of recommend, if you're using this instrument, to go ahead and do that so that you can save your bookmarks and save some of your work. There's measurement tools. We have various maps that you can put on for base maps. So you can turn on satellite maps or topo maps, drawing tools. And now I'm just going to, because we're limited on time, I'm going to begin to, and I'll demonstrate the tools on the right side of the screen as I go. I'm going to start on a project. So if I want to go to the Northeast region, we'll go there. And you'll see that the states show up then. I'm going to click Pennsylvania. And now we're looking at counties, and it's the counties are shaded by service. So if I want to look at the service level of the unserved or unfunded sites within a county, this is the key. I just click that drop down arrow and the key will come up. Just know that. Now I'm going to click on Somerset County and zoom in. And you'll see that a lot of things lit up here after I zoomed in. And that's because this is very data heavy. If we try to turn these on at a higher level, it'll make the map much slower. But you can change the visibility level. I just want you to know that. So you can set the visibility range, but by default, they're the way that they are so that they'll work. So right here, this layer you see says underserved and unserved, unfunded BSLs. This is FCC data as of, it's actually more, oh, okay, that's correct. That's from January 25th. They're updating these data every 2 weeks or so, and this is just a part of the process we're going through. The big update will be this month when we get version 4 of the fabric. And everything's going to change, I think, fairly dramatically. But right now, when I say underserved and unserved, that's changed by FCC standards. Now it's unserved. If it's less than 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up, it is now considered unserved. But when I built this, it was, and again, you can turn on your key. It was underserved was less than 100 megs in grade and 25 megs up. So I'm going to turn that on. And you can see it gets pretty chaotic as soon as I do that. Now I go down a little further, and these are filings by the FCC. All retail services available within a 1/4 mile radius. If I turn that on, I'm going to zoom in a little further because it's going to get really chaotic. Now I'm curious about telemed, so I'm going to turn on seniors. So we have some demographic layers in here by census block groups. Seniors, school age, low income, minority. These are the ones that we wanted to focus on. The school age came in simply because of COVID. We added that during COVID with the RDOF map. But now you have chaos here. So the first thing I want to do is start filtering this out so that I can start making sense of what I'm looking at. So I'm going to go to, in the rural communities, you really would like to focus on fiber to premise. And I think that everyone would agree with that. So I'm just going to filter out by fiber. And now I'm just going to be showing where I have fiber in this area. I'm going to take it a step further, and we have a group filter on here. And the group filter just goes by solid number. Whatever I put in here, if I'm talking about census blocks or block groups, it's going to show me percentage. If I'm talking about these points, like this, if I click on one of these points, it's telling me that I've got 30 unserved units, unserved, unfunded units within a 1/4 mile radius of that point. I'm going to type in 25 here, so this is going to sort of simplify things a little bit more. So I'm again interested in Somerset County, and this is Somerset County. And what I see here is low-hanging fruit. So instead of all the chaos now, I can see that I have a bunch of unserved locations right here, BSLs right here, broadband service locations, and a bunch of fiber right nearby. So I'm going to zoom in there because that's an easy problem to solve, it looks like to me. So I want to know who's got that fiber because that's what I'm going to call. And that is Q call, and they've got 10 gig down, 10 gig up. And I don't have any inline tests in here, but this is what's been filed, so this is what I'm going. But again. So what I'm interested in is bringing, so they've got 70 units served within a 1/4 mile of that point. And at this point, they've got 33 units, and at this point, they've got 5. So I'm thinking, along this line, I could probably talk to Qualcomm or QComm. What was it? QComm. Whoops. I didn't mean to get anybody's names wrong there.
We're fixing it.
QComm, and I actually know this person, so sorry. But I'm going to call them and I'm going to say, would you work with us on this? So to do that, I need a conceptual plan to get them to look at this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off, first off, I'm going to turn off stuff that I don't need. So I already know that I've got seniors. I've filtered out, I've got 27.99% seniors out of 1,211 people in that census block group. We're going to turn that off because we're trying to keep these things simple. I want to go from one point to another point. I'm going to just mark these points that I want to go to and from. So I'll mark green where I want to go from. That's where my fiber is. Then I'm just going to go red to where I'd like to go to. I'm just going to put a couple points in here. All right, so now I'm going to turn off that other layer with all the retail service. And I'm going to I'm going to remove my group filter because I want to capture everything. So I'm just going to reset that. So the other points are going to show up. Now I'm going to select and draw my area of interest. And you can use whatever tool you like here. I like using the lasso, so that's what I'm going to use. Now I'm just going to go from this point, and I'm just going to draw along, try to capture as many points as I can. Actually, this time I'm going to clear that because I want to do one more thing. We use roads as an approximator. So where you see any CRD, that's the Northeast Center for Rural Development. That's us, Pennsylvania. I want to turn that on. That's a measurement tool. If I click on one of these segments, it'll tell me I'm passing for this segment at 1.21 miles. I'm passing 64 structures. This is derived from satellite, not fabric, so you can download these data. And that's 53 structures per mile. Now it's important to note that, and the key is telling you greater than 40 structures per mile is green. That means that's probably the market would maybe solve that problem. That's usually what the internet service providers are looking at, something around that figure. Less than that, 10 to 39 is yellow, and less than 10 is red. So I just want you to be aware of that. So now I'm going to go back to my select tool and go back to lasso, because I want to capture those roads. And again, this is rough, but it's just to give you an idea of what can be done. And it did not select my roads. I'm going to do it one more time. That did that, by the way, because I had the roads checked right here, or on the select box. Okay, so now I've got my road selected, but I see stuff there that I don't want. It's a little bit too much. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to hold my control key down so I can deselect this one. I have one over here that I don't want. I'm going to deselect that. Just trying to get fairly reasonable places that I think I want to serve. One more time here. Apologies, I'm not used to working with this. Just real fast, one more selection. And get rid of what I don't want. And by the way, if you go to this website, my colleague, Tom Bresnock, and another colleague, Megan Marple, I put together a series of videos to show you just what I'm showing you here now, so that you can do this yourself and you can go through those at your own pace. There's a bunch of really great videos. So I'm going to look at first I want to look at the statistics for what for my lines, for what I just measured. And I'm just looking at my total distance there. So I want to go 22.71 miles. Sorry about that, I just saw the screen fade. 22.71 miles, that's that total mileage there. So, okay, I'm going to make a layer from that. You can export this. If I went to export to GeoJSON, that works with shapefile for your GIS people. You can actually export it as a CSV if you just want the data. I'm just going to make a layer. So I'm going to create a layer, and I'm going to call that layer project. And something else that I'd like to look at is statistics for the unserved BSLs that I have in that area. And that's telling me I have 320 unserved BSLs with, what did I say, 22 miles roughly. And if you're going at 25,000 drops per mile, because in your rural communities, $25,000 a mile is not unreasonable. Low density is less cost. You're using a lesser density of fiber, so just be aware of that. And transparency is always going to be critical with these projects. I'm not going to save the layer. I'm just going to make note of the number. What did I say? 322 PSLs, if you want to do the math on that, go ahead. But I'm not going to save that as a layer. In fact, I'm just going to turn that off. I have my project now. So I'm going to deselect and clear that. I'm going to go back to my layers. And I'm going to turn off the rows there. So there's my project. But what, that's not telling me everything I wanted to tell me. And what we've done with the fabric is we went to 200-yard radius and showed you who wasn't served at that level. So I'm going to turn off quarter-mile radius. I'm going to turn on 200-yard radius. Something you should notice here. I'm going to zoom in on something real fast. So I'm saying that I've got 67 units. Oops, I hit on a road there. I've got 67 units unserved right here. I want to know where those units are. So I'm going to turn it to satellite. Now, it looks like they're all down here. You could have guessed that, right? Because you have the rows there, but just to be clear on something. I'm going to say, so I'm saying 200 yards. I'm going to switch this to yards. Okay. I've got 1 minute, then I'm not even going to do this, but you can explore that. The videos will explain. So I'm going to zoom back out to my plan here. And I'm going to print that. And when I print that, it's going to default to a PDF, and you can navigate to your own printer. One day I want you to see here, sorry, this is taking a second to load. You want to hit advanced because you want to turn your legends on. Turn on your legends. Go back up. Go to map extent, what we're looking at now. You can fool around with this, but this is what I found works best. And you can change whatever. So if you're using a plotter, you can change your format to a much bigger map. So you have a lot of options here that you're not seeing, right? Just one more second. I want you to walk away with the idea that you can do your own conceptual. Okay, there it is. It's done. I'm going to just save it and open it. And maximize that. So you have a conceptual plan here with the legend. You can go to your ISP. Say, here's what I'd like to do. Here's why. I think in the near future, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think in the near future, we'll be able to let you download that cost quest data from things I'm hearing. And maybe you guys are hearing the same thing, that will eventually become public. We hope so. But even this should be good enough. You're within 200 yards. You've got your counts. You've got your roads. And again, you can export the shape files. That's really what I wanted you to see. Oh, great. Thanks. Sorry, I went a little.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you, Harry. Next, I'd like to invite Jerry to give us some reflections, please.
Hello, everyone. Cumberland County, New Jersey, not Cumberland County, Pennsylvania. So a little context. Cumberland is about 480 square miles, 160,000 population. Salem, a little smaller, about 372 square miles, with 130,000 population. All except for 4 municipalities in the 2 counties are eligible for USDA and are considered rural. So Jersey, everyone who hasn't been to Jersey and seen The Sopranos believes it, everyone. It looks like The Sopranos, it does not. Our community is very rural. We have Violin, Millville, Richland, and Cumberland County that represent about 80% of the total population. In Salem, there's only 1 community that's actually not USDA eligible. And so our experience has been a little different. I was asked to talk about our particular experience. So we were one of the 35 entities that received the middle mile grant from the NTIA. So we received a $24 million grant. And I was very happy. I've been working on broadband for the last 10 years, reconnect through USDA, trying to get money to Cumberland and Salem County. We got the $24 million grant, and I was very excited to begin implementation, and then found out shortly thereafter that there was a lot of lobbying going on. And we are in the process of implementing. I guess I should say the opinions expressed today are not the opinion of the Improvement Authority or the Federal Home Loan Bank, just Jerry Velázquez. I'm not going to mention the providers. But there's been a lot of lobbying going on with respect to whether or not we should implement our middle mile. We've had a lot of conversation with NJBPU. That's the entity in Jersey that's receiving last mile of BEAD funding. So we've had a lot of conversation. Cumberland Salem was one of 5 communities that was going to be put into the initial pilot, up along with Sussex, which is up in the eastern part of the state. So we have two counties that we put together for the application. As I said, a $24 million application. Redundancy. First mile comes from the west of Delaware, from the east, either Pennsylvania or Atlantic City. So from our experience, I can tell you this: if you're trying to implement the broadband, first of all, without the information that Harry and his team provided, you're done. I mean, the anecdotal information, the FCC information, we in Cumberland County and Salem County, they said we're 98% covered. We are definitely not 98% covered. So as you go through this process, and I've been involved in community engagement my entire career, 30 years, involved in Hope 6 projects, working with neighborhood residents. And the worst meeting that I've ever had in my 30-year career was a broadband meeting where our provider, that starts with a C, which I will mention specifically, showed up with a room full of people. And they were just talking about how horrible the middle mile application was and how horrible and what a waste of taxpayer money it was. And we just spent 4 hours getting lambasted by people from everywhere except for Cumberland County. And it was terrible. So know that you're going to need information. You should not expect any support going into this. Unfortunately, our residents haven't gotten the concept that even though they're sitting out in the middle of nowhere with limited opportunity for broadband, that they should be screaming and yelling at the top of their lungs. So again, this information is critical. We also received a Reconnect grant for Salem County. We use this information specifically to lay out where that infrastructure should be placed for last mile. We've laid out where our infrastructure should be for the middle mile. We've kind of confirmed the layout of the middle mile. So again, the process is very particular and peculiar, especially now. One of the interesting dynamics that's happening right now with respect to BEAD funding is we have the larger entities that have been providing services, starts with a C, starts with a V, in our community, who are now saying, trust us, we will take your BEAD money and we will do a great job of implementing BEAD funding so that you don't have to spend any money on your middle mile. It makes no sense to waste your money on the middle mile. So again, from my perspective, this is Jerry Velázquez's perspective, not the Improvement Authority or the Federal Reserve Bank, but you need to be very creative with respect to garnering support. Our biggest supporter, there's a group called the CEO Group, which is about 60 different CEOs from predominantly Cumberland County, but the region. And so we brought our legislators, our local legislators who are fighting this because they've been told it's not a good thing. And we had 60 business people in the room, CEOs, and they kind of looked at them and said, I don't understand. You're getting $24 million from the federal government. Why wouldn't you take it? And we spent 3 hours talking about why that was such a stupid idea. And then our local legislators stood up and said, "You're right, it's a great idea." And that was about 2 months ago. They've been fighting it behind the scenes ever since in hopes that it won't happen. So my story is, it's a great thing. It's a great opportunity. You need to take this information and you need to use it to the best of your ability and understand that even though it's a great concept and it's a big need, even though people should realize that water, sewer, electric, and broadband are necessary in order for us to thrive. We are the economic development arm of the county. So all businesses that want to come to Cumberland County kind of come through the Improvement Authority. We do site selection. And so it's critical to the business community. It's critical to business development that we have the ability to support them, not only to turn on their lights, but also to provide them that, broadband down in our neck of the woods, logistics, warehousing, data center. We get once a week, a company that wants to come to our county, and without the ability to connect them through broadband, that's not going to happen. So again, I'm going to be poo-pooing all of this, and I'm not. I'm the glass half full all the time guy. But you should know that even though it's critical, it's important, you're gonna have to find folks to support what you want to do, providers that want to get involved, and folks that are going to look past the large ISPs that are out there right now who are battling this every step of the way. And I've told folks if they didn't believe it was going to be successful, they would let us implement the minimum mile, try to fail, and then take it over pennies on the dollar. But that's not the case. They know that once we get the ability and have the ability to bring additional competition to the community, that they're going to be in for a tough road to hoe. So again, it's a great thing. You need to do it. It's critical. This information for us was crucial. Up until I bumped into Penn State folks through Phil, we were kind of trying to figure out how we get past the anecdotal in the FCC, because everyone was touting. They showed that big map and it was blue dots everywhere, and you couldn't find a spot in Cumberland County or Salem County that wasn't served on the FCC map. So this information is critical to making those things happen. So that was it. I just wanted to share my experience. That was my job. I wanted to make sure you understood how critical this information was, and from an economic development perspective, from a telemedicine perspective, from a educational perspective. Without broadband, we are not going to succeed. So for those of you who are able to implement and make the middle mile, last mile happen, you're going to find a lot of success going forward.
Thank you very much, Sherry. And one of the things that I really took away is the importance of trust, right? Trusting partners, trusting providers, and trusting data. Right? We all know that data can lie. So making sure that we're finding our trust in all of these capacities seems absolutely important. Nathan, wondering if you'd like to share some reflections.
Sure. And I know Philip wants to get to the questions. I know, Chris, you've got a lot of questions, so I'll try to be fast. Nathan Flood, President and CEO of KINBER. For those of you who don't know who KINBER is a 501c nonprofit in Pennsylvania. We are a unique organization that's been around about 15 years. Haven't been in the space as long maybe as Sasha, but we have built, owned, operated, and managed networks across Pennsylvania. We've actually also got into the digital equity inclusion space in the last few years, even before it actually became part of what was being funded through the federal government. Through some programs with the Pennsylvania Department of Education, we've actually worked with libraries within various communities, including Somerset, to actually help expand access to devices, but also work with them in identifying needs within those communities. Being around for 15 years and building a network that is in a good part of rural Pennsylvania, I understood some of the pains that you've gone through, Jerry. But we also found that we can work with a lot of the providers in those areas. We were a middle mile network. They expanded across the state, enabled a lot of small providers in rural parts of the state as well that may not have been able to have that access to transport back to Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or any of those other major markets. But we're able to actually serve some of those communities and work with us to address the needs. So that was some of our successes, I think, in Pennsylvania and what we're doing. And I think we're also excited about the opportunities as we see going forward with regards to digital equity and inclusion, helping communities address their workforce initiative needs, really hitting that third leg of the stool that you heard talk about, that skills capacity, skills training that's needed. We can bring them people can bring them access. People can bring them devices, but really what happens next? How do we get meaningful use? And you've heard the state talk about this. What's the meaningful use that comes next with this? How do we enable people to further their lives and have an impact in the communities they live and even stay in the communities they're at? The last thing I just want to say is, you heard a lot about data and information. I think what we've heard already through both Sasha and also earlier commentators, but also with what Jim and Harry have talked about is, data and information is really important and critical to decision makers. But I think it's also just as important as you're reaching out into your communities to engage with other organizations, whether it's libraries, nonprofits, those that are actually on the ground and seeing what's going on. As Chris just said, data can lie. You can get parts of the information, but it only tells you part of the story. So I think as you're trying to address this issue within your communities, engage locally, engage with those that are actually on the ground, engaging with the community members, serving them, and reach out and find out what they see and see whether or not it's actually real with what you're seeing in the data.
Great. Nathan, a man after my own heart, talking about community engagement. I mean, so absolutely important. So we've got about 20 minutes for questions. I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to launch it out first to our audience. Does anyone here have any questions for our panelists and experts? Okay, if not, I'm going to take moderator's privilege. Oh, was there one? Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, Chris. Question for Jerry. So you mentioned that you're seeing a lot of lobbying right now from large incumbents to try to take this funding and direct it toward what we've been doing for the past several decades. What do you see as the antidote to that? How do you work against that lobbying as an organization that has a vested interest in creating not only short-term economic development, but economic development that lasts for the long term, prices that remain viable, customer support that remains viable for these rural areas?
So that's a dead man walking question. I'm that guy. Look, it's information, it's data, like Nathan mentioned. You got to get the data out. You have to start banging on the drum and remind people. These folks that are telling you that they're going to implement this and do a great thing are the same folks that we were suing 5-10 years ago because they weren't doing their job and getting folks, the necessary infrastructure. So there's no one solution. Community engagement, part of our particular problem is we have one of our state representatives has gotten involved in a way that is really against the initial mission and the objective, which was to create more competition. So the big providers are saying, it will fail, it'll be a waste of money. And in today's local world of our local politics, failing and wasting money is not a good way to get reelected. So they're pushing all the right buttons. And really the key is to revisit what the success has been, talk about what the opportunities are, bring money to the table, and try and make sure that people understand what the actual data is saying, not the anecdotal information. Again, there's no one solution, and you just need a lot of support, particularly from the business community, in this case, who are influencing the folks that are making these decisions. Thanks.
Yeah, in Vermont, we've been quite successful in the past couple of years getting fiber to some of these rural areas. One of the things that real estate agents always ask us when people were buying homes in Vermont is, are they connected? And so we've seen the cost of housing. Now the big issue, if you look at Vermont the past couple of years, we're a very small state, so take it with a grain of salt, the data. But the point is, we've seen a tremendous influx of people. Our goal was to attract high intellectual margin business. We're being successful at that. But what that's done is creating a real serious housing problem and a struggle for the working Vermonters. So I'm not sure, is that unique to Vermont, or have you analyzed? I always say, you want to look at the unintended consequences of success. And this is one of those unintended consequences we're seeing. It's really causing a problem for Vermont. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Or is that a problem you wish to see?
It's the good news, bad news. It's right. Do you train or do you get the jobs first? Right. It's the catch-22. For us, certainly, I'd like to be in that position where I'm trying to figure out how to solve the housing problem because we have new people coming to our community that are going to be part of our economy. So it certainly is a problem. We have folks that are moving outside of Cumberland County right now because they can't get the internet or they can't get educational system that they want. So that's something that we have to deal with on a regular basis, all of the things as you bring new folks to the community. But it certainly is an issue, but it's an issue that I'd love to deal with as opposed to not having the internet and not having the opportunity to attract those folks to your community.
You know, by the way, we have the second highest per capita homeless problem in the nation right now. So, I mean, it is, you know, I'm complaining with my mouth full, but it is a serious issue.
Right, I just add to that. This might be a little too strange, but you know, the whole point behind the Broadband Navigator is to facilitate community conversations. It's not to say that the data is the end of the conversation. It's meant to be the beginning of the conversation. And Chris and I were talking before the program today about a rural community in Pennsylvania that literally has zero broadband right now. I mean, it's really bad.
Matt says it's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, depends on which map you're looking. Ours says it's not that great. So, but I would, you know, and to me, it's about having a community conversation in that particular area about what they want to be, right? Do they want to be attracting new residents and new businesses, or do they like the rural characteristics of the community that they currently have? And I think blending the data with the desires and the vision of the local elected officials is where it comes in. And I know that's a little kind of esoteric and maybe out there, but it's really, in our opinion, and maybe this is an extension thing, but our opinion is really to have community conversations about what people want. And then if we have those issues, let's work through them together and try and find local solutions to help benefit that. So I apologize for being too thorough.
Well, I actually don't think that's esoteric at all. I think that's actually where my thoughts go. It's, you know, there are communities that don't want growth. There's communities that want growth. We have a state program, but it's real important to go right down to the town level. I like what you're saying. I think that's really a good approach.
And it sounds like the importance of making sure our communities have the right tools at their disposal to empower themselves to choose their own digital destinies, whether or not that is, you know, whatever path they're going to take, but making sure that what y'all were talking about and Christine, what you were talking about, make sure that our towns and communities have these advantages. One question from online, before I take others from the audience, from Billy Kiger. Can the panelists speak to their experience or need for a more responsive locate schedule? How's that about locating? No. Okay, then we'll let that one sink in, and maybe we can talk about it over lunch. I saw some other hands up. Yes, sir. And if you could introduce yourself,
sure.
Please do.
Yeah. Dave Stalen, I'm the CEO of TIA, and this is an elephant in the room question. Definitely, communities ought to be able to help pick their digital future. But we have rules that are written from NTIA, for example, with BEAD, that can be very overwhelming for small rural phone companies as compared to some of the big phone companies that have large staffs, et cetera. How do you balance that? Where you have these very complex, in many ways, overwhelming rules with the need to meet the community, the local community, both in terms of building the network and then maintaining the jobs in that rural part of America?
It's a great question. Who wants to take it?
I'll take a stab at that. I mean, I think that, you know, you've hit one of the bigger problems that I think are out there for some of the small providers, particularly the telephone providers, that they have a high bar for service that they have to meet. And I think that, you know, I think one of the things that we've talked about, you know, working with legislators, talking about some of the challenges that, you know, just with the funding alone, I think there's a lot of regulatory changes that need to happen at the same time. So that it levels the playing field for providers like yourself that may have certain rules and requirements they have to meet, where others that may not have to meet those same restrictions or same requirements. I think there's a number of different things that have to happen, I think, as you know, beyond just that. And I think the state and PBDA have been working on this, but, you know, how do you address leveling the playing field, not just for small providers and large providers, but how do you actually level it so that you can deploy this infrastructure in a way, you know, you hear about pole attachments and other fees and things associated with that, and delay the development of this infrastructure. So I think it's a comprehensive approach that has to happen both between the communities that address the problems and the needs, but also the regulators and the lawmakers that are setting those standards. And you have to have that dialogue, and it's not easy because sometimes you're also competing against others that may not have the same issues, and see that as a problem.
I was going to say, it even goes to the ability to generate match, which you probably already know. So the smaller providers have lacked the ability to do the match. And then going all the way back to CAF2, one of the things that we found, we're a big fan of rural electric co-ops too. And one of the things that we found as a challenge is the infrastructure that they have internally to be able to manage the bureaucracy that they're going to face in going after some of these funds, which can be overwhelming. So you're 100% right. It is an elephant in the room question. And I do agree that I think there's some regulatory and some interventions that need to be made in order to be able to empower the smaller providers to be able to go after some of these funds.
Yeah, it creates, I think it creates a disadvantage or maybe an advantage for the larger providers because they're actually able to address that. And I think that if we're trying to address in certain areas that maybe the large providers don't want to go, I think I heard earlier in one of the presentations, they didn't get applications in certain parts of the state. If you want the small providers to go in there or an entrepreneur to go in there and take those risks, you have to level that playing field a little bit so that they can actually absorb that and compete.
Yes, please.
If I could just shameless plug,
You can introduce yourself as well, please.
I'm Natalie Roper. I'm with the Just Transition Fund, and we have grants to help solve this problem. So come find me if you are trying to support a small ISP in your community going after these infrastructure funds. We were founded to level the playing field for co-ops and small ISPs. So just come talk to me.
Is that just in PA?
It's nationally. It's in coal impacted communities. I'm not sure we have what issues, but PA has a lot of coal impacted communities. So come talk. Natalie's great. Love her.
Love the love.
Working.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll jump in with a question as to give our audience a bit of a break. To each of you, our communities are at different levels of planning. And Jim had just talked about one community who is just beginning this process in northern Pennsylvania to think about broadband planning, digital equity planning, digital inclusion planning. So maybe if we could just go one at a time, starting about what guidance would you give any audience members or communities that are kind of just at the beginning of their digital equity journey? Harry, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we offer this service as extension at no cost. We will work with the counties to help them develop their plans. So contact us, and my contact information is in the folder. And the other thing that I'm adamant about, and I think everybody's going to agree, is transparency is critical. Understanding what the real costs are for your installs, what the attached fees are, that sort of thing. That should be publicly available. If you're working with an ISP, they should divulge that to you. So transparency, just make sure you're seeking those numbers out so you understand what you're paying.
I think from my perspective, it's understand what your capacity is and what it isn't, right? So from an implementation perspective, from a design perspective, understand what you can do as a public entity, and then bring the partners necessary to the table to help you implement the project, right? So sometimes we shoot too far, don't have the capacity. Sometimes we have the capacity and don't realize that we can take on these roles. So we have a community in Cumberland that has its own electric utility, and they're actually parallel. They've been implementing fiber when they were connecting their homes to their electric to their homes. So they're actually implementing their middle mile, last mile project at the same time that the county's implementing its project. And we talked about bringing them to the table and having them play a role from a county perspective. The county doesn't have the backroom capacity to build, to do customer service, even repair. So bring partners to the table that can help you implement the project and understand what your capacity is critical. Because if you shoot too far and don't have the capacity, you're in a position where you can't implement the project as you want it to be.
I would just add that I'm going back to where I started, and that's trying to level the playing field with the data first to be able to facilitate those community conversations so that we have what we think is good data or the best data we have available. How's that? Maybe that's a better way to frame it. It could always be improved, and we're always looking for ways to improve. So if you find something on our tools that, gee, it would be helpful if we had this, we're up for those kinds of conversations. So again, it's always evolving, it's always changing, but using data-driven access to be able to facilitate strong community conversations. Again, even you heard Harry kind of went through it really quick, but he was talking about deploying aerial fiber in rural communities at $25,000 per mile. You don't hear that conversation very often, and that's not what you're going to hear from major incumbents, but it's a place to start the conversation. This is what we've heard, right? And I think that's what we're trying to do is make sure there's data available for why these projects are out there, and then engage in the community conversation with ISPs as part of the conversation to be able to deploy these projects.
Yeah, I would add inclusion is key. When you bring people together, look around the room and see who's not there. Who's not at the table. Is it a K-12? Is it a university? Is it a library? Is it a nonprofit? Who's actually addressing and servicing the people in your community? And what do they see? What are they engaging with? And maybe they're doing something in this field, or they're doing something to address this right now, and you didn't know it as you're trying to solve this problem in the community. So I think that's the number one thing. Once you sit down, figure out who's not there and invite them to the table, and see what they're doing. Not just in your community, what's going on at the state. That's the shameless KINBER plug. That's what we're doing as well. We're engaging at a statewide level with communities to help build their capacity. So, there's, take the experiences that we've had, and we want to share them across the state.
Great. So what I'm hearing, transparency, capacities, data-first conversations, inclusion are all great first steps for communities just starting to have some of these crucial digital inclusion conversations. Well, we've got time. I'm saving my one last question for so we've got time for one more session.
Hi everyone, Sasha Meinrath. A question for the Harry and Jim. I'm curious if you're using these tools. I love that you guys have created kind of a very powerful layered evaluation metric or framework that could be deployed to do analysis. And I'm curious if there are any plans to look at your cost estimates versus, say, all the applicants that applied for capital project funds, the winners of capital project funds, so you can see where they align and where they're discrepant. Because I feel like that might prove quite illuminating if you did.
I'd love to work with you on that.
Oh, great.
I think that's a really good point, but I wanted to mention something that I thought was really interesting. So I looked at the April 3rd data, just unserved, unfunded, FCC data. So there, according to the FCC, unserved, unfunded, we have 8,459,625 BSLs in the United States. At $4,200 a drop, which is kind of the number that we use for the BEAD allocation, that comes to $35,530,425, meaning that we have $42 billion, more than enough money to serve all of these unserved BSLs. In Pennsylvania, according to those same data, 113 unserved, unfunded BSLs at $4,200 a drop comes to $979,074,600, meaning that we have the funds there. If people aren't gouging, if people are fair, all of these sites should be served. So Sasha, I'd love to work with you on doing some sort of analytics with what you're talking about.
So if you were betting a pint, do you think we have enough money in the program?
To serve this many sites. I'm saying to serve this many sites, the unserved, unfunded BSLs.
I get the hypothetical. I'm saying, like, if you're betting a pint, do you think we will serve all these unfunded or all these?
I'd like to bet a pint on that too, so let's
yeah.
Listen.
I'm saying that $4,200 a drop will serve these sites. It's more than enough. If you look at what we just looked at when I did that real brief presentation, that came to about $1,800 a drop, which is not unusual for unserved and unfunded. And that means that you're competing all along. If you're overbuilding, if you're along that line, you're actually in competition with the rest of those sites. So, the money's there is what I'm saying.
Well, can I just put a kind of a big hole in that? It's because in Vermont, for example. The unserved areas right now, we have 6 passings per mile. You know, and so we're looking at about $5,575 per passing. But the problem with that $5,575 is that you've got to do a 25% match. And what our data shows that when you get over less than 4 paying customers per mile, even if you gave the network away, it will go out of business because you can't support the operation maintenance cost. The NTIA doesn't understand the cost of operating a network, the operation cost, because I suspect there are areas in the country, I suspect Texas is going to see at least 40% of their area be no bids, which hopefully will provide money for the rest of the country. But at the end of the day, there's a huge flaw in the way the NTIA is carrying this information out.
Yeah, the operating costs of something, that's a whole nother.
That's all. Yeah.
Well, and some, I mean, I will buy a round if anyone wants to nerd out of an extreme high cost determinations. In Kansas, they're looking at 16,000 a drop in some parts of rural Kansas. So, anyway, that's a great nerdy conversation. Okay, I've got 1 minute left before I see Phil walking up. So I'm going to put everyone on the hot seat. You've got 30 seconds to answer this question. How do we make sure we don't screw this up? Nathan, let's start with you. 30 seconds.
How do we make sure?
Hot take.
I don't know how we make sure we don't screw this up, but I think that what we should really think about is the long-term impacts that this can have for the various communities in rural Pennsylvania. I think that everybody that's thinking about this, don't plan for solving the problem today, which is trying to get access to people's homes. Plan for where we want to be in the next 10 to 20 years. And I think if you think about it in 10 to 20 years from now, where we're going to grow and how technology changes and evolves, we'll have a good infrastructure that actually serves the needs of the people that we want to impact.
Hey, great answer, Jim.
I'm just gonna say engage and act now.
All right, Jerry.
I think we need to make sure we don't repeat mistakes that we made in before, right? So the large providers, if they haven't performed, let's put it this way. Let's take a look at how they perform and expect that performance will continue into the future as you make your decisions going forward. How's that?
Yeah. That was all right.
I'm going to say transparency, every step of it. I mean, every step of your implementation needs to be transparent.
Look at that. Great answers from everyone. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Phil, but I want to thank her.